Hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about the topic of livers for former alcoholics. The article that I asked you to read was by two authors, Moss and Siegler, one a bioethicist, the other, well they're both doctors, but one focuses in medical ethics and the other is a liver transplant surgeon. And their article is called, Should Alcoholics Compete Equally for Liver Transplantation? Okay, and what I want to talk to you about today is first I'll give you some context for what the debate is about and some kind of, I guess, medical facts. Then we will talk about basically the article, the Moss and Siegler article. They start off by citing what they call three important facts. They think that alcoholics or former alcoholics, as we'll soon see, should get lower priority for new livers, and they anticipate two objections to this view, so they want to discuss both of those objections and then try to refute them. And then they want to give two arguments for lower priority, okay, for former alcoholics. One argument has to do with fairness, and the other has to do with public opinion. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so a little bit of context. So let's see, there are basically two broad types of liver disease that we can distinguish, and they come with kind of acronyms attached. So here's the first acronym. ESLD means end-stage liver disease. So like kidney disease, which was the last unit, end stage for liver disease means no matter what you do now, your liver is dying and is never going to recover. That's the functional definition of end stage. Nothing you can do will make the liver better. It's on its way to death and it will eventually die. That's end stage liver disease. Okay, ARESLD is alcohol related ESLD, end stage liver disease, okay? And then NARESLD is non-ARESLD, or in other words, non-alcohol related end stage liver disease, okay? So the two broad types of end stage liver disease are these two, alcohol related and non-alcohol related. And I think, although I don't remember the exact statistic, I'm going to pause and look at this statistic and then I'll get back to you. Yes, okay, I looked up the statistic. I wasn't sure about it. About half of all ESLD cases are ARESLD, in other words, related to alcohol. Okay, that's kind of a large number. And so it makes the problem that the authors want to talk about like kind of pressing, because many folks who need a new liver because their old one is dead drank themselves into that condition. And so you might wonder, like, do they deserve to get a new liver? Or at least do they deserve equal footing with, say, a newborn baby who has some genetic disease like biliary atresia? Biliary atresia is a disease where the bile ducts don't form all the way, and so you get basically clogs that back up into the liver that causes liver disease. The livers die. But if they get new livers and you undo the clogging, then these babies can live normal, healthy lives. So the question is, should a former alcoholic get equal footing with one of these babies? The baby did nothing wrong, needs a new liver. The alcoholic, in a sense, maybe did do something wrong, drank his liver to death, and now also needs a new liver. Okay, so that's some terminology, I guess. Put it this way, terminology. Okay. There's also, I guess, a little bit of science that I can tell you, which is liver disease will kill you. And there's no analog to dialysis, from kidney disease. Remember, this was the topic from last week. When your kidneys are in end-stage kidney disease, or ESRD for renal disease, renal means kidney, you can go into dialysis. Remember, dialysis machines are these external machines that filter your blood and do one of the main functions that the kidneys do, which is filter out some toxins from your blood. We have nothing like that for liver disease. So the only thing that will cure ESLD is a transplant. Okay? It's the only thing that will cure it. Also, liver disease, or even ESLD takes years, often decades, to kill you. Okay, so sometimes folks have ESLD and it takes 10, maybe even 20 years before they die. So it's a very slow, very gradual process. Um, the liver disease, even before it gets to the end stage, is also slow and gradual. Okay, and the authors kind of make use in that in their discussion. They say, look, these former alcoholics who drank their livers to death, it's not like they drank for 1 year. They went on a binge for 1 year and now their livers are dying. No, it's that they drank for decades and decades. Their livers were still okay. Their livers were still okay. They're getting worse and worse and worse. Now it's end stage. They could have stopped drinking any time in like 20 years and they didn't. They chose not to. So, they don't deserve a new liver, at least with the equal priority. Okay. Let me give you some statistics. Epidemiology, some statistics about how common end-stage liver disease is, how many transplants there are, how many people are on the waiting list. So in 2011, here were some numbers. About 16,000 people waiting on livers per year. Okay, and this is compared to, remember we did kidneys last week, about 100,000 for kidneys. Okay, there are many more end-stage kidney disease patients than there are end-stage liver disease patients. One reason for that is the number one cause of end-stage kidney disease, which I did not go over last time, but I think it's useful to know this fact. The number one cause, at least in this country, of end-stage kidney disease, where you need a new kidney, is uncontrolled diabetes. So if you or your family members or loved ones have diabetes, please tell them to get it under control. Otherwise, they will be part of this. They will eventually be part of this statistic where they need new kidneys. Diabetes, by the way, is also the number one cause in this country of amputations and also blindness. Blindness, amputations, and needing a new kidney, all from diabetes, at least in this country. Okay. Where was I? Okay, so 16,000 people are waiting on livers per year. About 6.3 thousand transplants per year. And, contrast to kidneys again, about 17,000. Okay, so there are more people waiting on kidneys, but also there are more kidney transplants. Liver transplants are fewer, and although there are fewer people waiting on them, the gap continues to grow every year until these people die. That's what makes the gap not grow quite so fast. Okay, so about 1.4 thousand die while waiting every year. Okay, so about 1,400 people who need a new liver die while they are waiting. Okay, so if the shortage is this bad, you might think, should we consign newborn babies to die of this when there was a former alcoholic, who drank his liver to death and, could get a new one? Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about the UNOS Meld System. Okay, UNOS Meld System. This should be capitalized. Probably system should be capitalized too. Okay, so UNOS is the United Network for Organ Sharing. Okay, MELD is Model for End-Stage Liver Disease. Okay, so this is the United Network where all liver transplants in this country go through UNOS, and they use a MELD system. They have like a mathematical model that predicts or tries to estimate how severe someone's liver disease is, and they use that model to rank people higher on the list or lower on the list, depending on how severe the liver disease is. More severe liver disease gets higher on the list, closer to getting a transplant. Less severe liver disease gets bottom of the list, further away from getting a transplant. Okay. So the MELD score is based on several blood values, several blood values, bilirubin, INR, aka PTT, same thing, creatinine, okay? Bilirubin and INR are, related to or come from, I'll say, these values, lab values, come from proteins made by the liver, okay? If you don't have enough of them, you're doing badly. Your liver is doing badly, okay? Creatinine is not actually a liver-produced protein. It's a breakdown product of muscles, okay? You might know, some of you who are maybe sports fans or baseball fans may have heard of things like creatine kinase and like these kinds of drugs that some baseball players were taking, like precursors of steroids and so on. So this is related to that. Creatinine is related to creatine kinase, breaks down, okay. So these are all related. Breakdown of product of muscles, flushed out by kidneys, the kidneys. So it's a measure of kidney disease, actually. But it turns out, in the model, measuring kidney disease because kidney disease tends to be related or correlated with liver disease, it turns out that measuring the creatinine gives a pretty accurate estimate of how bad your liver disease is too. Okay? But kidney disease, I don't want to say but, kidney disease is correlated with liver disease. Okay? So bad kidney function is associated pretty tightly with bad liver function. All right. Okay. The MELD score, that's not the only thing they do, though. Let's see. Priority. How priority is determined. Okay, for livers. Oops, did not want to do that. Okay, so they have the UNO system, they use the MELD score, but they also use many other factors in determining who gets priority, okay? So it turns out the first factor that they use is local versus distant. If you're really far away from the donor liver, you get much lower priority, maybe not even on a list. Basically, there are many, in this country, there are many local lists, and you have to join a local list, and you don't get to join lists that are far away, okay? It's not quite like that. It's actually a little bit more nuanced. It's basically like this. As of December 2018, so this is kind of a new development, this is determined, how local you are is determined by radius from the donor. So someone dies, their liver becomes available. If they died in Camden, New Jersey, someone who lived in Cherry Hill would get priority. Someone who lived in Los Angeles would not get priority. Okay, so wherever the donor is, they determine a radius from that donor, and then they collect that pool of people, and that turns out to be a local pool. Okay, and this is kind of interesting. Radius from donor with smaller radius for deceased donors. Okay, whose livers go badly more quickly. Now, this system used to be a regional system. There used to be the simplified version that I began this description with, where there were just different, like I think 13 regions in this country, and you had to sign up in one region. They don't do that anymore. One reason they don't do that anymore is that it was easy to game the system. You could game the system by buying a house in a region that has not a lot of competition, and then you would get higher up on the priority listing in your new region. It turns out, for example, Steve Jobs did that. Steve Jobs, the former CEO of Apple, he lived in California. He was pretty low on the wait list in California. It was a pretty competitive list. And so he bought a house in Tennessee where where the list was not as competitive. He shot up to the top of the list in Tennessee, and that's in fact where he got his transplant, as far as I know. Okay, so they stopped doing that, and now they just have radius from donors. Okay, the next, I misspelled priority. Sorry, I just realized that. The next criterion they use is blood type, ABO, okay? So they want, like, basically a perfect match is best, identical is best, then compatible, then incompatible, okay? Next, they use body size. So if you are an adult, and you're a donor, you can give your liver to a new adult, or maybe to a couple of kids. But if the person who's donating, say a cadaveric donation, is a baby that just died, the baby cannot donate a liver to a full-grown adult, obviously. All right, so they want to do, body size measurements to make sure that the new livers can kind of do the best that they can. Okay, and then finally, there's degree of medical urgency, okay, as determined by MELD score. Okay, notice how nowhere on here, the official list, is any mention of alcohol, you know, ARESLD. So officially, it doesn't matter how you got your liver disease, your place on the ranking goes by this score. Now, unofficially, okay, but no one will transplant someone who has been drinking in the last 6 months. Okay, in other words, you're required to be sober, like, 6+ months to qualify and get on the list. Okay, the reason for that is that they don't want to transplant livers into someone who is at risk to start or continue drinking and then kill the new liver. Okay, so that's because no one wants to waste a liver on someone who will keep drinking and kill the new liver. Okay, so in fact, this is not the question that we are debating. We are not debating whether we should, or to what extent we should transplant livers into people who are currently drinking at the time they need a transplant. No, our question rather is, given someone who drank their liver to death many years ago, but also has been sober many years, maybe decades even, should that person get lower priority? Okay? Okay, so imagine someone who in their 20s, 30s, and 40s drank their liver to death. Okay, now 20 years after that, they are 60 years old. They are in ESLD, end-stage liver disease. It was caused by alcohol, but he's turned a new leaf. He's turned his life around. He's become a totally new person, right? Last 20 years, he hasn't had a drop of alcohol. Maybe you know this guy really well. You're really confident he will never drink again. Okay, he's a completely different person now. Should he get lower priority than, say, that baby who did nothing to cause his liver disease? All right, that's the question that we are asking. Okay. All right, so let's go over, actually, before we do that, let me do one more little factoid. So there is this fact that also is kind of presupposed in the literature. So maybe I'll do this here. Okay, the medical argument. Okay, so a medical argument would go like a medical argument against, or I'm sorry, a medical argument for lower priority for former alcoholics. Okay, for lower priority for former alcoholics. I say former here because what I mean is, again, people who drank their livers to death but have since stopped drinking for a very long time. So former alcoholics. Now, some of you, may have, family members or friends or so on who are alcoholics, and there's a saying among alcoholics that once you are an alcoholic, you will always be an alcoholic. The idea being that you are always at risk to relapse and start drinking again. That's not how I'm speaking here. When I use the word former alcoholic, all I mean is these people have not been drinking for a very, very long time. Okay? There is a medical argument for lower priority for these people, and that goes as follows. Former alcoholics do worse with new livers than other people do. Maybe because they are at risk to start drinking again, or maybe some other medical fact. Okay, fact causes them to do worse with their new livers. All right. Turns out the medical argument is empirically not well supported. Okay, so people have looked at the evidence to see, hey, if people who drank their livers to death many years ago but have since stopped drinking, if they get new livers, how well do they do with the new livers? How long do they live? How long can they take care of their new livers? And then they compare that group to other people who have ESLD but not from alcohol, and they've done comparisons, and it turns out it's basically a wash. Like there's roughly no statistically significant difference between these two groups. All right. Okay, so that's kind of a presupposition. So then the question becomes one about ethics instead of one about kind of these empirical facts, okay? So our question is, still, should former alcoholics, should former alcoholics get lower priority than everyone else. You know, the NARESLD patients. Okay, that's the question. All right, so Moss and Siegler, they want to argue yes, former alcoholics should get lower priority, and to do that, they first want to cite 3 important facts about liver transplants. Okay, first, they say livers are non-renewable, and I think they even use this phrase, absolutely scarce. Okay, what this means is, actually, okay, let me fill out a blank for number 2, number 3, and then I'll come back and give you a little more details, okay? So what this means is, what they mean by absolute scarcity is you can't make new livers whenever you want, no matter how much money you throw at the problem, okay? And it also means that there's no substitute, you know, unlike, again, dialysis for kidney disease. Okay. You also cannot make new livers whenever you want, no matter how much money you throw at the problem. So this is unlike, say, ventilators. Okay, something that's in the news recently with COVID-19, and there's a huge, coming. It's coming. Well, by the time I'm recording this, it's coming. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, it has already hit a huge shortage of ventilators. Okay, so no substitute. You can't just buy more. Okay, there's just absolute scarcity. There's like an absolute cap on the number of them. Okay. Okay, so that's the first fact. Second, they say, alcoholism is a direct cause of ESLD in a way that even diet and lifestyle are not direct causes of heart disease. Heart disease, you know, diabetes, and etc. Okay? So here what they mean is anyone who drinks enough is guaranteed to kill their liver eventually. Okay? In contrast, if you eat badly and don't exercise, you might still avoid heart disease. You know, depending on genetics, maybe luck, I don't know. Okay? So they say, look, with other lifestyle bad kind of behavior in lifestyle, like eating cheeseburgers all day, never going to the gym, being really overweight, and so on, yeah, that statistically leads to heart disease, but it's not a guaranteed cause of heart disease. Some people have those bad behaviors and never get heart disease. They're genetically lucky, okay? Alcohol and end-stage liver disease is not like that. Alcohol is a toxin. It will kill your liver eventually if you keep exposing your liver to enough of it, okay? Sufficiently small quantities your liver can handle, but if you have your drinking way too much for way too long, your liver will eventually die. Okay, guaranteed. Okay. Okay, finally, liver transplants are expensive. And actually, I'm going to pause here and look at some statistics for this, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I looked at some of the numbers. It turns out liver transplants are not the most expensive kind of transplant, but they are still significantly pretty expensive, and in fact, twice as expensive roughly as a kidney transplant. So some data I looked at about 2017 estimated about $800,000 for a liver transplant. Okay, and a contrast for this is about $400,000 for kidneys. Okay, this is kind of weird. I didn't expect this. $350,000 for pancreas. Okay, like $900,000 for bone marrow. Okay, and then this one I expected, $1.4 million for heart. Okay, heart transplants are quite expensive. Okay, so liver transplants are expensive, at least if the contrast is to kidneys, they're at least twice as expensive. Alcoholism is a direct cause of end-stage liver disease, and they're a non-renewable resource. Okay, so those are 3 important facts that Moss and Siegler think motivate a special kind of set of rules for livers that don't necessarily apply to other organs. Okay, now they want to consider 2 objections to their view that former alcoholics should get lower priority. Okay, so one objection that they want to consider is, first, alcoholism is a disease. People, my hand was in kind of the wrong spot. People who have the disease cannot control, cannot control their drinking. So they're not responsible. And you shouldn't blame them for drinking. So alcoholism on this, according to this objection, is a disease, just like cancer is a disease, or just like, autoimmune diseases like lupus are diseases. You just can't control it. If you have the disease, it sucks, and then you drink a lot, and then you kill your liver. So it's not something that you are at fault for on that view. Okay? And the second objection they say that they want to address is lower priority discriminates. It's not fair. It discriminates against alcoholics. And that's not right. Okay, so what do they say here? M&S, Moss, and Siegler. On the idea that alcoholism is a disease, Moss and Siegler say that's right. They absolutely agree. That's right, we agree. Okay? We think, we meaning Moss and Siegler, we think you are not responsible for drinking, or I guess having the disease of alcoholism and for drinking. You're not responsible for that. These are things that are outside your control. If you are an alcoholic, you cannot control how much you drink. Okay? But here's the important point. Okay? The important but. They say, but you are responsible for seeking treatment. So you're not responsible for the drinking, but you are responsible if you fail to seek treatment. Okay? And there's plenty of time to get treated before getting to end stage. Okay? Like decades, remember? So liver disease happens, but it happens very slowly. It takes a number of years to get to the end stage, and all of that time, Moss and Siegler say, you're not responsible for drinking, for having the disease. It's tough. It's outside your control. We completely acknowledge that, they say, but you should get treatment in that number of decades, and if you don't do that, then you deserve lower priority. Okay? So the issue is not that because you drank and that was in your control, you get lower priority. For them, the issue is because you didn't seek treatment for your alcoholism, that's why you get lower priority. Okay. And what about on discrimination against alcoholics? Okay. So Moss and Siegler say, in general, we should treat people with lifestyle-related illnesses, okay, equally. Like COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, for smokers, okay? But they say the difference between that and liver transplants is the scarcity of livers, okay? So COPD treatment for smokers, you might need nebulizers, you might need to go to pulmonologists, you might, in extreme cases, need ventilation, so on. But those things are not scarce. In contrast, livers are, again, go back to their 3 important facts, absolutely scarce. So livers are an exception. They think in general we should treat people with lifestyle-related illnesses equally, but livers are an exception. Okay, it's interesting now discussing this topic in the time of coronavirus, that there is now are going to be a scarcity of ventilators, and so I suspect that Moss and Siegler, I've never met these two people in my life, but I suspect that they would say, look, if ventilators are scarce, then smokers could get lower priority if they need treatment for coronavirus over like a newborn baby that has coronavirus or something. Okay. All right, so that's their responses to 2 objections. Now the 2 arguments. The first argument is about fairness, and this is the one that takes the most time and the one I'm going to spend the most time on, most time discussing. Okay, so their basic point here is they say it would be unfair if former alcoholics got equal priority with NAR-ESLD patients. Okay, just be unfair. Okay. So here's a challenge, though. What do you mean by unfair? What do you mean by fairness? Okay, such that they think it would be unfair for former alcoholics to get equal priority. Okay, so they answer this challenge. They want to say, answer, there are different conceptions of fairness which M and S discuss. They discuss all of them. Okay, so they have different conceptions of fairness that they want to talk about, and they want to say, on this model of fairness, here's what we say. On that model of fairness, here's what we say. On the third model, on the fourth model, okay. And in fact, they have 4, so I might as well just put that here. Okay, so I think I might have room for 2 models of fairness, or 2 ways of thinking about fairness on one slide. So first 2 ways of thinking about fairness. Okay. So 1, on the first way of thinking about fairness, you use this slogan, to each an equal share. Okay, so here you're thinking of fairness as equality. Everybody gets an equal portion of whatever the good item is. Okay, Moss and Siegler say that this is inapplicable because there aren't enough livers to go around, and if you cut them up into small enough pieces for everyone to get a piece, those pieces aren't big enough to do anything useful. Okay? So they say fairness in terms of equal share is inapplicable, okay? Because you cannot get equal shares of livers. There are just not enough to go around. Okay? Next conception of fairness is this slogan, similar treatment for similar cases. So this way of thinking about fairness says, hey, if these people are similar, you should treat them similarly, okay? So for example, if black people are similar to white people, they should be treated similarly. If men are similar to women, they should be treated similarly, okay? Like that. That's another conception of, or another way of thinking about fairness, okay? Here, Moss and Siegler say that ARESLD is not relevantly similar to NARESLD, okay? ARESLD's liver failure was preventable. Preventable. If only they had sought treatment, they could have prevented their liver failure, but take that baby with biliary atresia, nothing that baby could do would prevent that liver failure. All right? Okay, so that's the first 2 ways of thinking about fairness. Next slide. Last 2 ways of thinking about fairness. Okay. So number 3 has the slogan, to each treatment according to personal effort. Okay. Sometimes this is called meritocracy. Like if you deserve more, you've put in more work, okay, then you deserve, if you put in more work, then you deserve more, okay? Moss and Siegler say that this principle, this way of thinking about fairness, supports their view, okay, because they think former alcoholics didn't put it this way, if former alcoholics didn't put in the work to seek treatment, they don't deserve new livers. Okay, so they could have put in the work, but they didn't, so they don't deserve new livers. Okay, and then finally, there is this slogan, to each treatment according, to ability to pay. Okay, so this way of thinking about fairness just says, hey, what's fair is whatever you can pay for, that's what you get. And if you can't pay for it, you don't deserve it. All right? This is kind of a harsh way of thinking about fairness. And if this were a different class, I could talk about this in greater detail. But okay, for us, we're just going to leave it at this. Moss and Siegler reject this idea. Okay? They think discrimination, they call this discrimination against the poor, is wrong. Okay? All right, so they've discussed 4 different ways of thinking about fairness. The 4th one they reject, the 3rd one they say supports their view, the 1st one they think cannot be applied, the 2nd one they think in a way also cannot be applied because ARESLD is dissimilar to NARESLD. Okay? So 4 ways of thinking about fairness and then their responses to each one. Okay, next argument, last argument, okay? Second argument, public support. Okay, so they don't spend a lot of time on this argument, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time either, okay? But they make this point. They say resources are scarce, true, and in some places, like Oregon, okay, liver transplants aren't even covered by health insurance because they are so expensive, okay? So, and they make the suggestion, M&S suggest, the public may not endorse liver transplants to former alcoholics, right? They may say, hey, these are really expensive treatments. Why should we give tax dollars to people who drank their livers to death and never sought treatment when we could be giving our tax dollars to other people, like babies or whatever? Okay? So that's their second argument, that there may be public backlash if we give equal treatment to former alcoholics. Okay. I want to do one last point from their article that I think is important. It's kind of a caveat, okay, where they say, they want to say, what about ARESLD patients who haven't previously been offered therapy for alcoholism? Okay? So remember, their whole view was, if you are an alcoholic and you drank your liver to death, first, you're not responsible for being alcoholic, you're not responsible for drinking your liver to death, but second, you are responsible for not seeking treatment. You could have sought treatment for many years, decades, and you didn't. That's what you're responsible for. That's why you should get lower priority. Okay, so now they want to ask, what about ARESLD patients who didn't have access to therapy, didn't have access to any way to treat their alcoholism? Okay, well here they want to say they should be considered. These patients should get equal priority. Okay? So it's kind of a caveat, a little exception, something like that to their view. Okay, notice, last thing before I end this session, Moss and Siegler don't talk about details. They don't talk about how exactly these former alcoholics should get lower priority. They don't talk about how we're going to figure out who is a former alcoholic and who not. They don't talk about any of those kinds of details. They're only kind of making an in-principle theoretical argument. Okay, and that'll become important in the next article. Okay, so that's it. Thank you.